What if the divine wasn't something to be found, but something to be remembered? What if the greatest deception isn't that God is absent, but that you've been convinced you're separate from the divine source that birthed consciousness itself? We've been taught to seek enlightenment as if it were a distant shore, requiring endless spiritual labor and merit to reach. Yet what if this very seeking is the labyrinth designed to keep you wandering? The ancient Gnostics whispered a dangerous truth. Your divine nature isn't something to achieve, it's something to uncover. The powers that govern this world, both seen and unseen, have masterfully constructed a reality where you perpetually chase what already resides within you. This is the ultimate paradox of spiritual awakening. The treasure you've been seeking across lifetimes sits quietly behind the veil of your conditioned mind, waiting not for your discovery, but for your remembrance. By the end of this journey together, you may come to realize that the knowledge you've been searching for hasn't been hidden from you. It's been hidden within you, beneath layers of forgetting that were never your own making. The liberation you seek isn't found in accumulating more wisdom, but in removing what obscures the wisdom that has been yours since before time began. Buried beneath centuries of religious orthodoxy and systematic suppression lies a body of knowledge so transformative that those who encountered it were forever changed. The Gnostic traditions, preserved in fragments and whispers, contain practices that directly challenge the foundations of how we perceive reality itself. When the Nag Hammadi library was discovered in 1945, hidden in a sealed jar by Egyptian sands for over 1,600 years, it wasn't merely ancient texts that were unearthed, but a revolutionary approach to spiritual awakening that threatened established power. These were not meant to be mere philosophical musings, but practical methods for igniting what the Gnostics called the divine spark, that eternal fragment of true divinity imprisoned within human consciousness. The Gospel of Philip speaks of this awakening as no longer a Christian, but a Christ, while the Gospel of Thomas declares that the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. The Pistis Sophia describes the journey of the soul through layers of cosmic deception before reclaiming its true nature. These weren't metaphors to the Gnostic practitioners. They were maps of consciousness, precise instructions for navigating the labyrinth of illusion that the Archons, the cosmic jailers, had constructed to keep humanity spiritually unconscious. What makes this knowledge so dangerous even today is not its antiquity, but its immediacy. The recognition that liberation doesn't require intermediaries, institutions, or even time itself. It requires only the courage to face what the Gnostics called the terrible truth, that we are divine beings who have forgotten our nature, and that remembrance itself is the revolution that no external authority can withstand. If these words resonate within the chambers of your being, if you sense that beneath the surface of everyday consciousness lies a depth you've only glimpsed in moments of profound silence or unexpected beauty, then you've already begun the journey of remembrance. This space we share now isn't merely a transmission of information. It's a sanctuary for those who recognize that something essential has been missing from the official narrative of reality. By joining this community of seekers, you become part of a lineage that stretches back to those who preserved these forbidden practices at great personal risk. Subscribe to continue this journey of unveiling, not because you need more knowledge, but because remembrance is easier in the company of fellow travelers. When you join us, you're not following, you're remembering alongside others who walk the path of inner recognition. The ancient Gnostics formed secret communities precisely because transformation happens most powerfully in sacred circles of mutual awakening. Let this digital sanctuary be your pleroma, your fullness, where each revelation builds upon the last until the veil between you and your divine nature grows thin enough to dissolve entirely. Subscribe not to learn something new, but to remember something ancient, your true identity beyond all names and forms. To understand the forbidden practices of Gnostic awakening, we must first enter the mythic landscape where these practices were born. The Gnostic cosmology tells of a primordial wholeness they called the pleroma, the fullness, the totality of divine consciousness from which all beings emerge. Within this luminous expanse dwelled the eons, emanations of the unknowable divine source. Among these was Sophia, whose name means wisdom, who in her passionate desire to understand the unknowable origin created a disturbance in the perfect balance. From this disturbance emerged the Demiurge, a malformed creator god, who, separated from the true divine source and blind to its existence, mistook himself for the supreme deity. This Demiurge, whom the Gnostics sometimes identified with the jealous god of the Old Testament, proceeded to create the material cosmos as a flawed reflection of the true divine realm. To maintain his creation, he fashioned the Archons, cosmic rulers or forces that maintain the illusion of material reality and prevent souls from recognizing their divine origin. Yet in his ignorance, the Demiurge unwittingly used the divine light of Sophia in his creation. This means that within every human being resides a fragment of this true divine light, what the Gnostics called the divine spark or pneuma. This spark remains trapped in matter, surrounded by layers of forgetting, yet it never loses its connection to its source in the pleroma. The human condition, according to this cosmology, is one of cosmic amnesia, divine, beings who have forgotten their true nature and identity. The material world isn't evil in itself, but rather a complex prison of perception designed to keep consciousness identified with limitation rather than its boundless origin. The body isn't to be rejected, but recognized as the temporary vessel where this cosmic drama of forgetting and remembering plays out. The Archons aren't demons in the conventional sense, but rather the embodiment of forces that maintain the illusion: doubt, fear, attachment, cultural conditioning, and the constant pull toward unconsciousness. This mythic framework isn't meant to be taken literally, though the Gnostics understood that powerful truths are often best conveyed through symbol and story. What matters is that this cosmology maps precisely to the inner territory of human consciousness, the sense of separation, the yearning for home, the intuition that something essential has been forgotten, and the glimpses of a greater reality that occasionally break through the veil of ordinary perception. The myth of the divine spark isn't about distant gods and cosmic battles. It's the story of your consciousness, trapped in forgetting, yet carrying within it the seed of its own liberation. What if the Gnostic cosmology isn't merely an ancient creation myth, but a sophisticated psychological map of human consciousness? The Demiurge, that blind creator who mistakes himself for the supreme god, bears a striking resemblance to what we now call the ego, that constructed sense of self that believes itself to be the center of existence, forgetting its derivative nature. The ego, like the Demiurge, creates a world in its image, projecting its limited understanding onto reality and mistaking its projections for truth itself. It rules through limitation, through the constant assertion of, "I am this, not that," creating boundaries where none inherently exist. And just as the Demiurge is not evil but ignorant, unaware of the greater reality beyond itself, the ego isn't an enemy to be destroyed, but a limited function operating without awareness of the greater consciousness that gives it being. The Archons, those cosmic jailers of the Gnostic tradition, manifest in our inner landscape as the conditioning patterns that maintain our limited identity. They are the internalized voices of authority, the unexamined beliefs, the cultural programming, and the psychological defenses that keep us imprisoned in a reduced version of ourselves. They operate through fear, through the constant whisper that safety lies in conformity and danger in awakening. They are the aspects of mind that recoil from the vastness of our true nature, preferring the familiar confinement of conditioned identity to the boundless unknown of awakened consciousness. When you find yourself automatically rejecting a new perception or insight, when you feel the subtle contraction away from expanded awareness, you are experiencing the archonic forces within your own psyche. Sophia, divine wisdom, represents the intuitive knowing that persists despite all conditioning. She is the aspect of consciousness that recognizes its imprisonment and yearns for reunion with the wholeness from which it came. Her fall into matter isn't a moral failing, but a profound sacrifice, consciousness entering the realm of form and limitation to experience itself in infinite variety. The divine spark, that fragment of true light the Gnostics saw within each human being, isn't a theological concept, but an experiential reality. Those moments of clarity, compassion, and connection that break through the surface of ordinary awareness, revealing a depth and wisdom that the conditioned mind could never produce. The pleroma, that fullness of divine reality, corresponds to what contemplatives across traditions have called pure consciousness, the ground of being, the unconditioned awareness that precedes all form and limitation. It isn't a place to reach, but the fundamental reality always present beneath the activity of thought and perception. The Gnostic journey isn't about escaping the world, but seeing through it, recognizing its constructed nature while simultaneously perceiving the uncreated light that animates all things. This reinterpretation transforms Gnostic practice from esoteric ritual to direct inquiry into the nature of consciousness itself. The forbidden knowledge isn't forbidden because it's dark or dangerous, but because it undermines the very foundations of control, both the external control of institutions and the internal control of the conditioned mind. To recognize that you are not merely a human being seeking spiritual experience, but spiritual consciousness having a human experience is to initiate a revolution that no external authority can prevent. The walls of your prison were never built of stone and steel, but of thoughts believed, limitations accepted, and divine nature forgotten. And what can never be taken from you is the capacity to see through these walls, to recognize them not as reality itself, but as transient constructs within the boundless awareness that you truly yearn. If these words have awakened something within you, a resonance, a recognition that transcends intellectual understanding, then you've touched what the Gnostics called gnosis, direct knowing that arises not from information, but from inner revelation. This kind of recognition isn't measured in likes or shares, yet there's profound significance in acknowledging when truth has been spoken to the deepest part of yourself. When you signal your resonance with this ancient wisdom, you're not merely interacting with content, you're participating in a lineage of remembrance that stretches across centuries. Each gesture of recognition strengthens the field of awakening consciousness that connects all who remember their true nature. The Gnostics understood that awakening isn't an individual achievement, but a collective remembrance, each spark of recognition illuminating the path for others. In their secret gatherings, they would share symbols of recognition, subtle signs that communicated, "I see the divine in you." Today's digital landscape offers new forms for these ancient patterns of recognition. When you indicate that these words have touched something true within you, you're creating a visible thread in the tapestry of collective awakening. You're saying to others who may be just beginning to question the nature of reality, you're not alone in your sensing that there's more than what appears on the surface of things. This recognition isn't about validation or popularity. It's about creating constellations of remembrance in a world designed to foster forgetting. Let your recognition be a lamp for others who walk the path of remembering what was never truly lost. Consider how this understanding of the divine spark manifests in your daily experience. Have you noticed those rare moments when the veil of ordinary perception seems to thin, revealing a world more alive, more interconnected, more luminous than the one you normally inhabit? Perhaps it happens in nature, when the boundary between yourself and the living world momentarily dissolves. Perhaps it occurs in profound connection with another being, when the sense of separate selves gives way to a recognition of shared consciousness. Or perhaps it emerges in solitude and silence, when the constant chatter of thought subsides, revealing a presence that was always there beneath the noise. These aren't anomalies or random spiritual experiences. They are glimpses of your natural state, momentary remembrances of what you truly are beneath the accumulated layers of forgetting. How often have you dismissed these moments as meaningless or merely subjective, trained as you've been to trust only what can be measured, quantified, and consensually validated? The archonic forces don't operate through obvious oppression but through subtle dismissal, teaching you to doubt your deepest knowing while placing absolute faith in external authorities. You've been conditioned to seek truth everywhere except where it actually resides, in the direct experience of your own consciousness. Consider the invisible prison of time, the persistent feeling that awakening is a distant future event rather than the ever-present reality of your being. How much of your spiritual seeking has been projected into tomorrow, into the next practice, the next teacher, the next revelation? This displacement of truth from the immediate into the distant is perhaps the most effective strategy for keeping the divine spark dormant. The Gnostic understanding cuts through this illusion. Awakening isn't something that happens in time, but the recognition of that which exists beyond time altogether. Notice how your conditioned mind creates separation where none inherently exists. When you witness beauty, there's a moment of direct perception before the mind creates, a perceiver separate from the perceived. When you feel love, there's a quality of boundlessness before the mind constructs a lover separate from the beloved. These divisions aren't reality itself, but the mind's attempt to comprehend what inherently transcends its categories. The divine spark recognizes itself in all things, which is why profound love and beauty temporarily dissolve the illusion of separation. What would your life look like if you moved through each day remembering rather than forgetting your divine nature? How would you treat others if you recognized the same light shining through their eyes? How would you approach your challenges if you understood them not as obstacles to happiness, but as opportunities for the divine spark to know itself through experience? The forbidden Gnostic practices weren't elaborate rituals, but simple, direct methods for maintaining this remembrance amidst the constant pull toward forgetting. The most revolutionary act in a world designed for unconsciousness is the choice to remain awake, not once, but again and again, in each moment that you find yourself lost in the dream of separation. The journey of awakening. The divine spark unfolds as a spiral rather than a straight line, revisiting the same insights at progressively deeper levels of understanding. What begins as intellectual comprehension of your divine nature gradually transforms into lived experience. The Gnostic practices work simultaneously at multiple levels of being, transforming perception, purifying emotion, clarifying thought, and awakening the body's subtle knowing. This integration happens not through force or effort, but through consistent remembrance and the willingness to question every limitation you've accepted as truth. The divine spark isn't something you achieve or create, but something you allow to reveal itself as the veils of forgetting are gently removed. Each moment of remembrance creates a resonance that makes the next moment of remembrance more accessible, gradually establishing a new baseline of consciousness where what once seemed extraordinary becomes your natural state. The Archons, those forces of forgetting, lose their power not through battle, but through recognition. When you see the conditioned patterns of thought and emotion not as truth, but as temporary constructs within awareness, they begin to dissolve of their own accord. This is why the Gnostics emphasized gnosis, direct knowing, over belief or intellectual understanding. No amount of information can substitute for the lived recognition of your divine nature. The most profound Gnostic practice is simply to question the reality of limitations, to ask again and again, is this true, or is this a boundary I've accepted without examination? The divine spark awakens not through accumulation, but through subtraction, removing what obscures the light rather than trying to create it anew. Perhaps now we can see the opening paradox in a new light. The Keat, seeking that once seemed necessary, reveals itself as the final obstacle, the subtle perpetuation of the belief that what you are looking for is somewhere other than here, someone other than you, sometime other than now, The divine isn't absent, but overlooked in its absolute presence, like the fish searching endlessly for water while swimming in its depths. The Gnostic understanding doesn't add something new to your experience, but removes the veils that have prevented you from recognizing what was always here. The boundless awareness that is your true nature, the divine spark that has never been separate from its source. The greatest liberation comes not from escaping the world, but from seeing it clearly, recognizing both its constructed nature and the uncreated light that animates all forms. In this recognition, the world doesn't disappear, but is transfigured, revealed as a manifestation of the same consciousness that observes it. The separate self doesn't need to be destroyed, but simply seen for what it is, a temporary focusing of boundless awareness into individual experience, like a wave arising from and returning to the ocean without ever being separate from it. The knowledge that various powers have tried to suppress throughout history isn't dangerous because it's false, but because it's true. Because once recognized, it cannot be unrecognized, and it transforms not just the individual, but potentially the collective structures built upon the foundation of forgetting. To awaken the divine spark isn't to escape the human experience, but to fully inhabit it, to be present to both its beauty and its suffering without the distortion of a separate self that must gain one and avoid the other. This is the silence at the heart of the Gnostic understanding, not the absence of sound, but the presence of a peace that transcends all conditions, available in every moment to those who remember their true nature. As our exploration comes to a close, I invite you to pause and feel the quality of your awareness in this moment. Has something shifted in the field of your consciousness since we began this journey together? Is there a recognition that resonates beyond the level of thought? A knowing that doesn't depend on belief or agreement, but simply registers as truth within your being? Share below a single word that captures the essence of what has awakened within you as you've contemplated these ancient yet timeless understandings. Perhaps it's remembrance, recognition, wholeness, or something entirely unique to your experience. This isn't merely a comment, but a declaration of presence, a way of saying, I am here, awake to my true nature. In the Gnostic tradition, such declarations were sacred acts, moments when the divine spark consciously recognized itself. Let your word be a beacon for others who may find their way to this exploration, a confirmation that the journey of remembrance continues through each of us who dares to recognize what we have always been.